Let me first put my props here. I brought props today. I'm going to read entirely to the camera, just to warn you. YouTube's where it's at these days. I'm going to get right into it. I was going to thank everybody for, being here, and for Ryan for inviting me. So thanks a lot. This is a pretty fun event. I was also going to apologize to my friends for reading the same old thing I've been reading over and over again since my book's been out for over a year. But none of my friends showed up, really. So that's not that you guys aren't my friends, but you know what I mean. Let me get right to it. I'm going to read a little bit of the first chapter of my book just to get at the main conflict, so you kind of know what the book is about, or at least what we call the through line is, or the excuse for writing the book, I might say. And then I'm going to jump ahead to show a little something else. Let's see. I'm not good at using my reading glasses yet, so because I can't look up. I haven't mastered that skill. So far, this is the first chapter. A few pages in. What happened so far is I'm in 9th grade in class, speech class, and I'm summoned to the office, and my father's there, who I don't see that often. I have this romanticized relationship with him. I don't see him that often. He's a surfer. This takes place in Southern California. And so I think he's cool, but I in some ways don't know him that well. And we hop into his Land Rover, that pops up here. The other thing you need to know is there's a piece of surf wax melted to the dashboard of his Land Rover. And then he's just driving. And at this point, we've been driving for about 25 minutes, and he's been unusually silent and pensive. And this is the first thing he says. "I figured you should hear from me first," Dad said, and cleared his throat, "instead of reading about it in the paper or whatever." I opened my eyes and saw him wince at the windshield as if he'd bitten into a lemon. "They say I thought Barkley was sleeping with Julie, but that's not it." I had no idea what he was talking about. Julie was his new wife, a woman I'd only met a few times. I knew Barkley by name, a cousin of my father's who had some money. "I remember," he said, staring intently forward, gripping the wheel so hard the veins bulged from his forearms. "I remember thinking about how many lives that man had ruined, and then I woke up in jail with a real bad feeling. For a while," he chuckled grimly, shaking his head. "For a while what? Did he say jail?" My heart began to pound, and my stomach clenched. To be honest, it was kind of a relief when the guard finally told me I killed Barkley. We drove in silence long enough for the words to take on their meanings. He turned to me, a pale-eyed man with a round Irish face roughed up by the sun. "You can cry if you want," he said. I blinked hard and looked away, surprised by his words. I placed my hand over my mouth to hide a giddy smile creeping onto my face. "I don't want to make excuses," he said, "but Barkley wasn't a good man." The air in the Rover began to shimmer, and everything went strangely vivid. Dad's voice didn't travel through the space between us. It was just there in his head. Meanwhile, the other sounds, engine, tire, wind, came hushed, as if through a thick bubble of glass. The wax on the dashboard appeared distant and huge, like something you traveled to visit, climbing over the contours and cracks to get to that mound of frozen melt. The long angled stick shift was the same, an outrageous landmark. I too was giant, the hand on my lap carved from a mountain to the scale of Rushmore. I looked out the window, and the world revealed itself as false. A movie set thrown together just for this moment. The cars speeding by were driven by actors, pretending not to notice what was going on. The trees in the sky were painted onto screens. I covered my face in my hands to contain the maniac laughter bubbling in my chest. Oh no, I wasn't going to cry. The opposite. I felt wonderful. I know this sounds strange, even cold-blooded, but that's the right word. full of wonder. I'd become an actor playing myself in the movie about my life, and I knew nothing was ever going to be the same again. The chapter goes on. It's actually mostly about the speech I had to give in speech class, because life just keeps happening, even when you get news like that. Shortly after this moment, my father disappeared. He skipped bail. He went fugitive. Chapter 2 starts up while I'm in college. After a kind of troubled adolescence, you might say, or a checkered past, whatever the cliche is. He was captured in the Philippines, and I got the news. I was living with a woman, starting to take on the responsibilities of grown-ups, I suppose. And when I got that news, I really flipped out. It affected me a lot more than the actual, news of what he had done, him getting caught. And so I took off. I traveled to Guatemala. I bought a one-way ticket with just a few bucks in my pocket, and I tried to stay as long as I could. And most of the book is a travel memoir, where I was just living and trying to scrape together a way to stick around. I was avoiding, the whole bummer. But in this point, also this first chapter is kind of a drag. Most of my life and most of the book is, I think, more joyful. So now I'm going to write a part that I think is more fun. And I'm in a place I'm in El Salvador, staying in this government resort. They have something called that, or they're trying to entice tourists into their Civil War torn country, and they were giving free accommodations. So I ended up going to this place, and it was this airplane hangar full of army cots, hundreds of them, and I was the only guest. So I spent the night. It turned out the place was bat infested. There were hundreds of bats flying around at night after. So the next morning I wake up, and here's where I am. I woke at dawn intending to walk into town and then leave the Centro de Obrero resort in the afternoon. On the way, I paused at the famous surf spot. I should have set this up earlier. My guidebook told me there's this famous surf spot in El Salvador near where I was staying. The place is called La Libertad. The famous surf spot, and watched a dozen riders catching a long left-breaking wave about shoulder high. Envying their grace, I wished once again I'd learned to surf as a kid, and cursed my father a little for leaving us out in the desert, depriving me of my birthright. As long as I could remember, I felt like one of those storybook princes switched at birth and raised by peasants. If only I waited long enough, my true identity would be revealed, and I'd be restored to the palace. But maybe it wasn't like that at all, I thought, watching a surfer duck dive under a wall of foam, a move I could never have pulled off. It certainly wouldn't have been the first time I'd pretended to be someone I wasn't, so convincingly I believed my own impersonation. I'd gone through high school as a sort of amateur method actor, playing a character, day and night. I'd plagiarized from an actual Hollywood movie. I first encountered him on video, Jeff Spicoli, the stone surfer in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, while sitting on the couch with my mom and Ralph a few months after my dad disappeared. For those of you, I guess, too young or something, this is what Jeff Spicoli, who he is. He was the prototypical, here for the camera.
There you go.
The shot was of an old VW surfer bus, windows opaque. The side door slides open, and out of a dense cloud of smoke tumbles a then unknown Sean Penn. He lands on his back, climbs to his feet, whips his scraggly blonde hair from his face, and hides his eyes behind big plastic sunglasses. Then he goes to class, way late. I felt weightless with joy at the sight of him, in his Ocean Pacific corduroy shorts, checkered Vans skateboard shoes, Baja poncho. He looked like all of my father's friends, But he was better. Spicoli was funny. My hands began to sweat, and one foot started madly tapping the floor. Gone was the squirming uncertainty that had been my life's default mode. Finally, I knew what to do, who to be. I'd been searching in the usual places: sports, drama, attempts to meet girls, even Dungeons and Dragons. But nothing ever quite fit, not until Spicoli, a surfer who never surfed, a student who didn't study. He stole the show without trying, without even acknowledging there was a show to steal. How cool he was, how untouchable, how beyond history teacher Mr. Hand's tight-fisted sanctimonious. A lack of effort, a slackness was his weapon, and I saw that I'd been going about it all wrong. Where I'd been doing more, I should have been doing less. Spicoli smoked pot, and that's pretty much all he did. I figured I could handle that, or at least pretend. I developed a little laugh, like a very soft machine gun. The other students didn't know what to make of me and my raggy clothes, swim trunks in class, and shuffling gait. But eventually they figured it out. I was an idiot. A couple of months into the Spicoli act, my best friend and D&D cohort, the bespectacled, nerdy, and brilliant Rob P., shocked me utterly one afternoon by producing a 2-foot-tall bong from his older brother's closet. He expertly packed it full and fired it up. I could barely credit what I saw. Rob was actually doing it, smoking pot. I felt like a little kid as he set the bong in front of me, flicked the lighter. Just a minute, I wanted to say. Hold on. Even as I fit my mouth into the cylinder and sucked. Water bubbled. Smoke swirled. Alchemy was happening in there. I filled my lungs with hot smoke, coughed out a sweet cloud, and was higher than I'd ever wanted to be. I melted onto the floor and drained down the stairs into the living room, where I oozed into the fat chair and lay back, madly licking my pasty mouth and lips, noting for the first time the strange elasticity and squiggling energy of the human tongue. I chomped and licked and probed and smacked, having turned into nothing more than a giant mouth. That's when I saw him. In front of me, and just under the ceiling, floated the disembodied head of Felix the cat. This is what Felix the cat looks like for those of you who... That was my vision. It was the size of a jumbo beach ball, smiling insanely and frantically licking his lips, mocking my precise mouth movements. It wasn't as if he'd just appeared, more like he'd been there all along, and only now had I bothered to notice. His grinning, frenetic mouth was full of sharp teeth. He was not my friend. Would anyone like something from my magic bag of tricks? I kept hearing in his falsetto voice. I tried to master the workings of my mind, but the vision persisted. Like a nightmare you know is a nightmare but still can't escape. It occurred to me that I might be stuck like this forever. First occurred and then became a certainty. I'd done it now, destroyed my brain. From here on, I'd have to go through life pretending to ignore the giant cat head following me around like a personal moon. I tried to dispel Felix by feigning great interest in Rob playing in television on the console, but it didn't work. Apparently Felix could read my thoughts. And no matter where I looked, he'd bob just inside my field of sight. There'd be no way I could handle this over the long haul. The authorities would eventually catch on and lock me up. I'll stop there. Thanks.